my name is Miranda, and this is Family Ties getting started with genealogy. So before we properly get moving, I do have a couple of just very quick housekeeping things. Can everyone hear me okay, first of all? Awesome sauce. At any point, if you can't hear me, please just let me know and I will do my best to speak up. We are recording this program this evening, so if you prefer not to be in it, just let our lovely camera person know and she will take care of that. Tonight I'm going to reserve a good portion of our time together for questions. So I'm going to ask that you hold on to those until that time, just to make sure we can make it through all of the material. And then finally, at each place there is a program survey. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment to fill that out after the program, we would greatly appreciate it. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump right on in. Just to give you a little bit of a background on me and my connection to genealogy, I am one of the new adult services librarians here at the Marion Public Library. Prior to working here, I was the reference archivist and librarian for the Lincoln County Records and Archives Center, where the majority of my work focused around helping with genealogically based reference requests. But prior to that, I helped my parents with doing a lot of our own family history, which is why I love genealogy. It makes history so personal. But one of the things that I have learned over the years with this subject, one of the biggest things is knowing what resources are available when you're getting into it. That's a big part of being successful with genealogy. So tonight we're going to go over the resources offered by the Marion Public Library, specifically looking at the databases available through our website, our circulating and non-circulating collections, our Book a Librarian service, and then throughout I'm going to give you some tips that I've picked up over the years. So with that, also this is my very first program, so just so you know. So fingers crossed, no stuttering. All right, so on our website we have 6 databases available that focus on genealogy and local history. You can find those under the Find Information tab on our main page. Tonight we're really going to be focusing on these 4. They are the Library Edition of Ancestry, African American Heritage, Heritage Quest Online, and Fold3. These other 2 databases we have are the Sandhorn Fire Insurance Maps and Old Maps Online. Both of these are really helpful tools for tracing an ancestor's property and seeing how their communities change over time, but their offerings are a little bit more limited in general genealogical research, so we're really not going to talk about them. These 4 offer the widest range in record availability as well as just general genealogical information, so that's where we're going to focus most of our time on the databases. I do want to point out that 3 of these 4 databases, specifically the Library Edition of Ancestry, Heritage Quest Online, and Fold3, are all owned and partnered with the same company. So when you go to use them, you'll notice that they have a lot of the same search features, though there are some very striking differences between them, which we're going to talk about. And one thing I also want to point out with databases in general, especially genealogically inclined databases, is that a lot of people find them overwhelming or a little bit kind of frightening to use because they often give you a lot of different search features and options and stuff. These things are really very forgiving web databases. They say you don't have to have all of that information in order to run a search on them. Really, the only essential piece of information you need to have to run a search is a name, and even the name doesn't have to be exact. So these are very useful, very forgiving tools. Starting with our first 2, we have the Library Edition of Ancestry and Heritage Quest. Both of these databases provide access to a wide variety of records and content available from institutions all over the world. They're really, really helpful. If you were just getting into genealogy, these are the 2 I would start with. So the Library Edition of Ancestry.com is a specialized subscription of Ancestry that is in library use only, meaning you do physically have to be here in the building in order to use it, either upstairs on one of our computers or on our public Wi-Fi. It provides all of the same great access that ancestry.com has to its collections, but it does not include the family tree building or record saving features. It's, of all of the databases we have, probably got the widest search range on it because of how it pulls its results. It pulls from all of the collections it has access to. So you can get all kinds of information from all kinds of different places using it. Meanwhile, Heritage Quest over here is accessible anywhere you are with your Marion Public Library card, and it too provides the same great access to a wide range of materials. The biggest difference is how it has you run searches through the website. It will have you start with a specific record collection, such as say U.S. Census records, and then add additional features from there. It's really nice in that respect if you are just getting into it and you're not quite sure what you're looking for, so you don't get overwhelmed with search results and having to sift through them. So it's really, really helpful for that. And if you are inclined to just browse, both of these sites do allow you to do that as well. They also both provide access to guides to get you oriented to using both their websites and just genealogical research in general. Between the two, I prefer Heritage Quest's guides over library editions of Ancestries, because theirs are a lot easier to follow and are just nice and visible on their main page. So both very, very helpful resources. The next two that we have are African American Heritage and Fold3. Both of these are more specialized general collections for genealogy and accessible again anywhere you are with your Marion Public Library card. Starting with African American Heritage, it's an absolutely wonderful database for exploring African American ancestry because it provides access to both vital records and records specific to the African American community, such as manumission and Freedmen Bank's records, among many, many others. It also has a collection of reference materials to help put those records into context so that you understand more of your ancestor's story. And if all of that wasn't enough, they also provide personalized research assistance if you need it, which is really, really helpful, again, for understanding your ancestors' stories. So an absolutely great database to use if you need it. We also have Fold3 over here, which is a database that is more focused on military records. And let's see if I can do this without looking. For the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. There we go. See? Told you, first program, it's a good time. So, this database provides access to both military records, such as personnel records, as well as plans and reports, personalized personal records and collections from military leaders, and remembrances from soldiers. So there's a lot of really good information to find. Fold3 is part of the ancestry.com family, so it has a lot of those same search features and functions as the databases on the previous slide, but because it focuses on military records, it does allow you to search specifically by service branch, conflict, rank, and a number of other military specific things. So it's really, really helpful for getting into that information. But my absolute favorite thing with Fold3 is that it gives you a summary of each war that it has records for, to give you an idea of the major players and events of that war, so that, again, you get that good context to understand what was happening with your ancestor at the time. So very, very useful tools on here. I'm gonna take a quick drink. Am I doing all right so far? Or good times? All right. into genealogy overall, I recommend strongly starting with these databases first. I say it can be fun to go and see the paper records themselves, but I recommend really starting with the online searching because you have access to literally millions of records from thousands of institutions almost instantly. So it's very, very useful, and it's a little bit easier to get access to things without having to venture to that place. So here are my top 4 tips for working with databases overall. The first one is to cast a wide net when searching online. Narrow searches will have narrow search results. What I mean by this is a lot of those databases will offer you filtering options so that you can narrow down your results to, in theory, what's specific to just what you're looking for, which can be really, really helpful, but you don't want to rely on those too heavily because you can inadvertently filter out information that is specific to you. I often find that I have the best luck putting in very minimal information to search for, such as a name, maybe a location if I've got it, like Ohio, and a death year if I've got that, and then sifting through the results individually. Yes, it will take you longer, but the benefit is you are less likely to miss something important. Number 2 is that as far as strategy goes, when it comes to genealogical research, I recommend starting by collecting the vital facts for the ancestors of your direct line before getting into more detailed research about them. U.S. Census records are really great for this because they give you those family units over a span of every 10 years and being able to trace them through that time. I'm going to say it's just helpful to not get yourself overwhelmed at first. And when I say vital facts, I'm talking birth, death, marriage, parents. And then after you have that information down, you have a foundation to work with to verify other information you may find, which can be very helpful.
Can you repeat those?
Absolutely. So, birth, death, marriage, and parents. Those are the vital facts that we are looking for. And then number 3, always verify, evaluate, verify. You will get tired of me saying that, I'm sorry in advance. Hints or related documents when offered by databases, because you want to make sure that they are in fact relevant to whomever you're looking for. These databases want to be helpful, so they will offer hints when you are looking at a record for other records they think may be specific to whomever you're looking for. These can be really helpful, they can be accurate, but you need to make sure first before just accepting them. Because what ends up happening is you end up getting some very strange discrepancies, such as the curious case of one woman I met whose 5 times great-grandmother moved away from home, 2 years later died, 2 years after that got married, had 10 children over the span of quite a few years, and then died again. So clearly something wasn't quite lining up, so it's important again to verify, evaluate, and verify those records. And then number 4 is just a good habit to get into when you're starting out, is to keep track of where you're finding records, especially online. Specifically, where is the record coming from? What's the institution it's coming from? What collection is it part of? Volume titles, if it's in a book, page numbers, certificate numbers, all of that information is really helpful so that you can refer back to it later if you need to, and for the sake of your descendants who will be picking up the mantle later on. I say, my great-grandfather did a lot of genealogical research, which was really cool for me to see, but it also drove me nuts because he didn't record where any of it came from. So I was just like, oh. So, I say, for the sake of your descendants, please do that. All right, so we're going to switch gears. Now that we've talked about digital search tools, we're going to switch gears to the specifically physical materials that are actually located just, I think, above our heads in the local history room. primary sources that can help put those stories of our ancestors into context and provide us with evidence, supporting evidence for claiming family connections. There are a lot of materials in that room. Coming up with a comprehensive list is quite an undertaking, which I tried and realized was not something that was doable for an hour-long talk. So here's a list of just things that are more widely applicable to everyone, but this is by no means comprehensive of what's in that room. A lot of these materials listed here can provide supporting evidence for family connections, such as the obituaries, the Marion County vital records, the Marion County court records, and some of the other surrounding records that we have as well. And then a lot of it can also provide you with that great insight into what your ancestors' lives were like. Because that's a big part of why we do genealogy. It's to understand what our ancestors lived through. We have county histories, newspapers, yearbooks, all kinds of fun stuff to explore in this room. Unfortunately, the materials in this room, I should say, are non-circulating, so you can't take them home with you, but you are more than welcome to come up and peruse anytime you are here visiting us, and we would be happy to see you. So, records and local history collections make up the backbone of genealogical research and have for decades. A lot of the materials and information that can be found in these collections can't be found anywhere else, so it's important to understand what you're working with and how to use it. So here are my top 4 tips for working with historical records and local history collections. The first one is that it is important to include verified evidence when you're claiming a family connection. Family anecdotes can be really fun. They can give you some clues to where to look for information, but you really need to have that record to prove that family connection between one person and another person. And if, say, something happens, such as a fire, flood, or other shenanigan, where that record no longer exists, you want to then build up a good amount of documentation to point to that collection, or to that connection. It's really important to have that verified information, though. That's really the backbone of genealogical research. When you are evaluating records, number 2, it's important to use multiple factors beyond your ancestor's name. And those factors can be any other information you have about them: a birth year, a death year, a parent's name, a sibling's name, aunt, uncle, any other information you have. And the reason for that is that a legal name and a preferred name can be very different from one another, especially the further back in time you go. And there's always the chance that somebody has the same name as your ancestor. They may or may not be a relative of yours. So it's important to use multiple factors when verifying those records. Although, I say that, and there is a catch to this, when you are evaluating those records, number 3 is to keep in mind, people make mistakes no matter what time period. Misspellings, mismarking names, mix-ups, it happens a lot. So when you are evaluating those records, if the majority of the information on there matches to what you know to be true about your ancestor, but say the birth year is off by a year or 2, or the name is slightly misspelled, don't necessarily discount that record if all of the other information lines up correctly. So that's a big thing, is take some of that stuff with a little bit of a grain of salt, because it happens a lot. Census takers are notoriously bad spellers through the centuries. It's a good time. And then finally, record keeping practices and standards change over time and vary widely between counties and states and all over the place. So something I just recommend overall is to learn about the records that you are working with. Specifically, what situation would have caused this record to be created? Having that information can be helpful for you in understanding what was going on with your ancestor, as well as understanding or making a good guess as to why your ancestor maybe doesn't have this record but has this record instead. So it just can be really, really helpful to have that information about the records in general. And how might you find that information, I hear nobody ask? Well, you would use our lovely circulating collection. We have a good assortment of genealogical guidebooks and reference materials that you can take home with you if you are so inclined. Upstairs in our adult nonfiction section, the calls numbers range between 929.1 and 929.2. And these materials are geared at giving you that context, what records are available, what the records mean, and all of that good stuff, in addition to search strategies and how to find information. And these things run the gamut from being general genealogical resources like the ones seen up here on this slide and right here on this table, to very specific about a community, a nationality, an ethnicity, culture. So there's a lot there to explore and check out. No bad puns, thank you. You shouldn't laugh at my bad puns, they're real bad. So just a lot there to explore that you can take home with you. Next, we also have our lovely Book a Librarian service, where we can give you more personalized research assistance in 30 to 60 minute sessions. If you are interested in sitting down with one of us and brainstorming where else to look for records or how to use a particular resource, we're more than happy to help. To book that session, go ahead and call this number and tell them you'd like to book a librarian. Or if you go to our website under services, book a librarian, there's an online form you can fill out there for that too. We are more than happy to help, that is why we are here. And then finally, because working with people is very different from working with books and collections, I wanted to include something in here about how to go about asking for help for genealogical research. Because you'll find that it's very different from using other search tools. The first thing I recommend is to think about what your overall research goals are. Are you hoping to join a genealogical club like Daughters of the American Revolution, or something, Daughters, I think, of the War of 1812 or something of that sort? Are you looking to learn a specific thing about a specific family member, or are you just, this is just for fun, starting a new hobby? Whatever your goals may be, you want to make sure you share those with whomever is helping you so that they can give you the best assistance possible. And something else to consider is how the questions you are asking will enable that person to help you. Unlike working with a database, when you're working with a person, I recommend strongly making sure you're casting a narrower search net, specifically giving them, I'm looking for this, as opposed to I'm looking for anything. So that way they can direct you to the specific resources that are going to be helpful to you instead of just very general, here's everything we have a good time. It can be really, really helpful for that person to have as much information as you can give them about that individual. And then second to last, something to point out as well is that records contain information. Information itself is not a record. When you're working with another person, you want to make sure you mention both the information you are hoping to find and the record you are hoping to find. Because sometimes, unfortunately, throughout time, fire, floods, rats, and other shenanigans happen to these materials, so maybe that record doesn't exist anymore that would have, you know, your great-great-great-great-grandfather's, you know, the name of his father. But that information, whoever his father is, might exist in another record. So mentioning both the information and the record is helpful for whomever is helping you, so that way if they know of another record that exists out there with that information in it, they can recommend you to that. So it's important to mention. And finally, and most importantly of everything that I've talked about tonight, is to have fun. Genealogy is supposed to be fun. You find out weird things about your family that you didn't know, and all kinds of other shenanigans in general. Sometimes it will be frustrating. because a really annoying, very strategic fire, which you've noticed, I keep bringing up fire because it's a thing with my family, we call it the curse, where the one record that would help us move to the next generation, fire, the other record, fire. It happens. It's frustrating when it does, but you know what, that's okay. I still know that my sometimes great-grandfather had a secret family one county over. That was fun to find out. And all kinds of other stuff. That's the point of this, is it makes it fun and personal. So that is what I have tonight. Thank you all so much for braving the cold to come out and see me for my first program, which is exciting. And with that, oh, I forgot to all the animation. So thank you, and what questions do you have? Any and all?
I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
I have a question regarding, if I went to, I have a lot of documentation, if I want to scan it and save it for future generations, where is the best place to do that? Should I have a local database? Is there, where?
So there are a couple of different ways to do that. I would recommend creating something on the cloud as far as things go, so that way your information will migrate as technology changes. It's important when you're planning out more digital kind of archives like that to make sure that you can withstand a migration or two ahead. It can be it can be a bit of a struggle trying to plan that ahead, but something on the cloud is what I would recommend. There are a few different websites and things that will allow you to do that sort of a thing. The other thing you want to make sure that you do is keep track of the metadata, so the information about whatever you're scanning in, so the date that it was scanned in, where it came from, making sure that information is clean, because that will be important as you migrate those digital copies over to whatever new systems come through. So making sure that you plan for additional technological shenanigans. Okay. And yeah.
Where does Ancestry come from? I mean, the Ancestry program come from? Do you have something to go back to? Because I use MyHeritage.
Yeah.
And one thing I found out with MyHeritage is a lot of it is, this family said this family said that. Is Ancestry the same way, or is there a kind of a hard and fast?
So Ancestry.com, that's a great question. Ancestry.com is a database. They do have some of that information on there, but most of what they have are hard records,
Okay.
where you can search through them. That's their biggest thing, is they are part of the Church of Latter-day Saints, I believe. They run them just like they run Family Search and some other databases as well. But their main thing is collecting records and providing access to them. So they like having that hard evidence.
So in other words, there's a hard record that goes with it,
Yes.
not, this is what grandma told me, and
Yeah, to a point, yes. Let's say there is still some of that. There are chat rooms and things on there. You can add a family member to a family tree without having that hard documentation on the individual paid subscriptions, which can be a little bit frustrating if you are somebody who thinks you're related to that person but you're not sure and they don't have the records. So there is a little bit of that, but as I say, they're mostly focused on giving access to records. And then, yeah.
I don't have any history, so do I start with myself?
Yes.
And work to my parents and grandparents? I mean, is that the
Yep.
best place to start?
So yeah, so you want to start with you and work backwards with your direct ancestors. So, say your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and so on is the best way to get started. And then once you have that information down, you can get into siblings and cousins and aunts and uncles and all that good, fun stuff. It's really helpful to start with that first base of that direct line. Yeah.
So what if you have volumes of information and don't know how to decipher it, I guess is.
So that can be fun. Without seeing the collection that you have, it's kind of difficult to say, but I would recommend keeping things together by individual or by family unit, and then kind of going out from there. The way my dad has it set up, and I tend to agree with this, is that he has a binder for each individual family unit. They're very small binders, mercifully, and each binder has a number on it.
Okay.
And in the front of the binder has a list of which numbers are connected to which other numbers for the sake of sanity, because after a while, you can get down into the weeds of tracking family members.
Yeah, cause I wanna say at least 6 or more 3-inch, 3-ring binders.
Yeah, that's how
Information.
that's how my great grandfather kept a lot of his stuff, which was fun for my dad and I to go through and go, what are we looking at?
I've leafed through it and saw some really neat stuff, but I'm like, I have no idea what I'm looking at, really.
Oh yeah, and included in the packets are actually a couple of ancestral charts, which can be really, really helpful for just getting that name and then some basic details about that as far as keeping track of who is connected to who. So, yeah. And then thought I saw another. Yeah.
You showed the stuff and you showed that you can use your library card.
Mhm.
Do you have to be in the library to do it, or can you do it online at home?
So the only database that you have to physically be here for is the library edition of ancestry.com. All of the other ones you can be at home just so long as you have your library card number. Okay. Any other fun questions? Yeah.
I can give you the question.
No, you're fine. That's what I'm here for.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending which way you wanna look at it, my family starts like in 1914.
Okay.
And all of it comes from Europe. How can you get information on people from Europe?
So that can be a little bit tricky depending on what language it's in. The library edition of Ancestry does have access to some of those records. I would actually recommend going less with potentially one of the resources we have here and more to like Ellis Island or those sorts of places, because they also have records of who came over when. Although some of the books we do have, although not down here, upstairs are more specific to, like, this one is a whole series of discover your insert ethnicity, ancestor here, kind of a thing, and it goes into the how to find like your Italian ancestors, your German ancestors, British, and that sort of a thing. So there are some things out there, but it can be really tricky to track those down, especially depending on what language the records are in. That tends to be the hardest